speaker is Matthew. Mattia had, at the age of 16, got his start in the field of plant breeding for working at Rutgers University in the turfgrass science area. And fascinated by cultivar development, he pursued a BS in agronomy at the world's best university, Iowa State. And then he continued his research at the University of Florida for his Master of Science degree in tomato breeding under Dr. Jade Scott. He's currently pursuing his PhD studies at the University of Florida and citrus breeding under Dr. Frank Knitter, who spoke at our symposium last year. His research involves the mapping of phytochemicals and nutrients in citrus germplasm and consumer acceptance of nutritionally improved cultivars. Let's welcome Mattia.
Hi everyone, I'm Mattia, as I was just introduced, but as Spike said, I didn't write Iowa State was the best school in the world, so I was some ad-lib, so I'm just going to continue with citrus. So unique phytochemicals, human nutrition, and breeding potential is the topic today. So consumers are demanding healthier food. This shouldn't be a surprise for a lot of people. Many foods are known as functional foods. This was talked about in the symposium. Functional foods are a title given to a group of things that are considered to have a function other than just empty caloric intake. So like if you're used to like table sugar, there's lots of calories but not much there. And functional foods really aren't something that's really talked about in the US. It's more of a European, Asian concept that people do. We can't label for functional foods here in the United States. Functional foods are a fast-growing sector of the food industry, and they've grown at 6.8% over the last 10 years, and they've had an estimated global value of $168 billion in 2012. So consumers are demanding healthier food, but it comes tertiary to taste and price. So people want things that taste good, and people want things that are cheap. So this comes from the International Food Information Council survey for 2015, and it shows also the variation from 2006 to 2015, which is how long they've been doing this market-based research. And this is people's decision to buy foods and beverages. But I think that consumers are actually biased because of marketing and labeling. So it's very rarely that you go into the supermarket these days and you don't see anything in a package. So you're going in and you're bombarded with advertisement and marketing. One study found that consumers see colored packaging as healthier. This is a huge bias. So in this study, they're asking people for, why did you buy this? And they're like, oh, of course, taste, duh, you know. But at the same time, these labels are influencing people. Down here from Intel, 72% of U.S. consumers purchase organic food based on health and nutritional values. So a lot of people are seeing that label, USDA certified organic, and they're saying, I don't know really what that means, but I'm getting a health benefit from this, or at least I think so. So that's a lot of what they're doing. And as I mentioned, consumer data is based on self-assessment. So this is an example from the University of Florida. Dr. Crosby mentioned it yesterday. This is a taste of the tomato. And here is an example of something that's actually advertised as having a potential health benefit in phytochemicals. So you have this marketing, they're in a box, they're packaged, and you have health, flavor, and freshness as being three categories that kind of pull consumers in. We're not saying that, you know, they talked about pomegranate juice yesterday and showing cheat death. They're not saying that you're cheating death here, but they're giving consumers pieces of data from research saying 50% higher lycopene, and they're giving them a heart and showing hearts and things like that. They're not actually saying they cure or prevent anything, but it is a driver for this. So people are choosing the phytochemicals based on functionality, and there's a few plant breeding programs that are developing these with enhanced nutrition in mind, and that's basically because a lot of the phytochemical constituents are really hard to measure. So what are phytochemicals? They are basically plant-derived nutritional compounds that benefit people. Phytochemicals are kind of a broad term, and it consists of flavonols, flavonols, anthocyanins, all that kind of stuff that you guys have seen in the presentations in the last few days. offer nutritional benefit and disease prevention. So what is disease prevention, or why is citrus a great source of these phytochemicals? And it really just comes from the wide distribution of citrus uses in the ancient world. So a lot of those ethnobotany studies where people found that people were rubbing citrus on their skins to prevent infection, or people were drinking it in tea to prevent all different kinds of disease and improve circulation. And citrus contains a more diverse set of carotenoids than any other plant species, and these pathways and genes have been really well documented. Citrus pigments are also very diverse, and there's a lot of interest in anthocyanins. In Florida, a lot of anthocyanins, so you hear about blood oranges and blood citrus and that kind of stuff. We don't get enough cold period to get those kind of anthocyanin expression in the fruit, so really the anthocyanins that we would be dealing with at UF would be in the form of grapefruit. In sweet orange, there are over 170 phytochemicals, and that's in the juice, so that's not including any kind of peel tissue or anything like that. So again, phytochemicals, they have a health benefit. A lot of them are consistent with anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, anti-arthritigenic, antiviral, and antioxidant. You have inhibition of cancer, protecting DNA from oxidative damage, and activating carcinogenic detoxifying systems. And these kinds of things are things in the medical field that people are looking at as preventative to disease treatments. So a lot of the population is aging, healthcare is very expensive, and people are saying, what can we do to prevent these kinds of things from happening? And phytochemicals is the answer. We'll see you in the next slide, or part of the answer. So here we have cancer cells that were grown, and we have the inhibition concentration for the different types of phytochemicals and the apoptosis count. And what you're seeing is it takes low amounts of those three compounds highlighted or bold in red to both inhibit cancer cell growth and to activate cell death in cancer cells. So you're seeing like pretty big effects with those phytochemicals. And you see a lot of them have a big long name, and those names are because they're processed in the liver to a different form. So as you consume these things, they're processed into, they're either hydroxylated or something else is added to it, and it becomes a different form, and it's actually has a different availability to the body and a different activity in preventing these kinds of disorders. So citrus breeding review, I just wanted to cover this really quick because citrus is very, very different than a lot of the small grains and things that we talked about. We just talked about a lot of genetic diversity in wheat having like thousands and thousands of accessions, but when all of your plants are living and you have to keep them living forever to have that genetic diversity in a lot of species, that's a difficulty. So citrus trees are very heterozygous. Shouldn't be a surprise. Single cross produces a lot of variation. There are different species within the citrus genome. They can be intercrossed, and different species have different uses. So for example, sweet oranges, people refer to them as oranges. Not all citrus is oranges. So sweet oranges, citrus sinensis, they're usually for juice. Some are freshly eaten. Citrus paradisi, grapefruit, that's either juiced or eaten fresh, mostly eaten fresh. And citrus reticulata, which are mandarins, so those halos, cuties, things that you see there easy to peel in the supermarket, that's them. So different species, different crosses, and they can be intercrossed. Longevity period from the time that you plant a seed to the time you get fruit, maybe 10 years. Who knows? Could be 4, could be 2. It's actually most likely not 2. So, and citrus are clonally propagated, and genome sequences are available. And that's some of the stuff that we grow in Florida. Actually, it's most of everything that we grow gets fresh and processed at the bottom. Pigments. So what I really want you to take away from this, those are some pigment instructions at the top, but at the bottom here you have a whole bunch of varieties, and this is all juice from sweet oranges. So you have Parario, Natal, Hamlin, Valencia, Baja, Lima, and Paracora. And these orange varieties are, so Hamlin and Valencia are primarily grown in Florida, and the rest are primarily Brazilian varieties. And what you see is this big spike in carotenoid concentration in Parario. So from a consumer point of view, that could be either an advertising benefit or and a potential health benefit. So an advertising benefit for people developing the crop and a health benefit for people consuming it. But in terms of carotenoids and handling Valencia, it's not really that good. So variation exists again. This is in total phenolics, flavonoids, and ascorbic acid in citrus. So we're going to talk about Mandora first. That's a cross between mandarin, which is the easy peel stuff, and sweet orange, which is that interesting stuff. And we're going to talk about Valencia, and Valencia is a sweet orange variety, and then Rio Red, White Marsh, and Ruby Star are all grapefruit. So these are all different species. Well, different species, but one is a cross between two. And what I really want you to see here is that in total phenolics, flavonoids, ascorbic acid, and carotenoids, that pulp and peel tissues, the peel is always consistently higher in these antioxidant compounds, phytochemicals, than the pulp. So that's really an interesting reading for us because nobody needs to peel oranges. In terms of processed products, that might be a good thing. So taking these peels as a byproduct and using them as something else, either as an additive to a food or something like that, that might be another area. But in terms of breeding potential, we want to breed oranges with phytochemicals on the inside and the consumable portion that aren't on the outside. And you also see the same variation within specific phytochemicals and the same kind of trend. So this is Naratin, Hesperidin, and Mandarin. I'm not really good at pronouncing them. But you already see pulp and peel values being relatively similar, but relatively different between those two. So always higher phytochemicals in all three categories in the peel and in the pulp. So comparing apples to oranges, this was a study done in by Chang, from New Zealand, and they basically, apples have a very similar structure to citrus in a lot of ways. So what they did was they made a cross, and they had a segregating F1 population of apples, and they were measuring different levels of phytochemicals, both in the skin and in the cortex. So the cortex is the light gray, and the skin is the dark gray, and it shows it both in different accessions. So you have Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, Red Delicious. I'm not an expert in apples, so I'm not really too positive about what they all mean, but this is for one locus. It's the LAR1 locus, and A, B, C, and D are 4 different phytochemicals controlled by that one locus, or found to have an association with that one locus. And what I really want to show you is that in this cross, they had individual number 260 that they picked, and that had pretty decently high phytochemicals A, B, C, and D. However, the next individual, number 563, had low levels for all of these 4 phytochemicals that they tested. So in a breeding program, because we're not measuring these things, there's a risk that we could breed them out. So if this number 563 has really good color and great storage life and all other great qualities yield, we could potentially pick this one as variety if we're not measuring phytochemical levels, which is a detriment to consumers. So future research. For us at University of Florida, we're going to measure health-related phytochemicals in citrus germplasm. We're going to develop QTL linked to phytochemical variation, test molecular markers as a hybrid screening, and determine if Florida growers have an economic incentive for growing these improved varieties with nutritional content. And conclusions. Consumers are demanding healthier food. Their influence to purchase food with higher nutrition. Packaging helps in this area. Variation exists within our populations. There's risk of developing cultivars with low levels. Horticultural plant breeders should be considering measuring nutritional traits, and a genetic map and marker development is necessary to track and improve traits. And nutritional information may prove useful in developing new cultivars. So if there's any questions, and also can't come from Florida and not mention citrus greening, so that's a huge problem and really, really affects our breeding program and our germplasm availability. So I have, can we save citrus? So I'll take any questions like that. Yes?
Right now in Florida, what's the use of the peels from industries? what people do with that?
Usually cattle feed. Yes.
We talked about Rio having the highest levels of carotenoids. How can a consumer go to the grocery store and say, "Hey, is that a Rio?" In terms of health benefits?
Right. You wouldn't be able to do that. That would be so. Like, let's say that you're a plant breeder and you license a variety. In the release, you could say that we have higher levels of carotenoids, and then whatever company that's sent to would then have the responsibility of marketing it to you as being, this is Rio or whatever. So.
They've already done it with the deep red grapefruits developed at the Citrus Center in Westfield. All those deep red grapefruits have lycopene, some of them 80%. And so they're much better than the original Ruby Red.
Yeah. Ruby Red looks really red.
And they market it, deep red grapefruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So most of these reports on phytochemicals are based on some in vitro studies that have been done on cells. How do you anticipate going to actually see efficacy in people?
It's really difficult, actually, for clinical trials and things like that. And I'm not an expert in clinical trials, but they try to do as many models as they can, so mouse models. There was another slide that I was going to include that had rats and tumor suppression, but it looked really gross. And I hate the look of rats. So really they're testing it in models first, and that'll definitely have an effect. I mean, animals aren't exactly the same as people, but it gives kind of a good.
So you're going to feed your varieties to different animals then?
To different animals?
Yeah, is that what you're sort of proposing?
No. Hopefully someone else will do that. Yes?
So I personally don't eat grapefruit because it has interactions with so many medications.
Yeah.
Is Naringen something that y'all always look at in your breeding program, and is it something that y'all keep in mind if you cross grapefruit to other species?
What you're referencing is the level of furanocoumarins, and that's what interacts with heart medication. And it's a problem with grapefruit, but there's like conflicting research in this area. So some people say furanocoumarins do, some people say they don't, but doctors tell you don't do it anyway because it's not a good idea because they're not really sure. So at University of Florida, we actually developed a grapefruit with low levels of furanocoumarins, and I think it's called UF 914. And it's going through levels of testing right now for that. So it's a red grapefruit, low levels of heart medication. But we don't typically, if we're making like a grapefruit or a pomelo sweet orange cross, which is grapefruit, we don't really typically measure that.
What's the phytochemical that interacts with allergens?
I don't know.
Or in all of them, it's pure.
Furanocoumarins.
And peculiar.
All right, I think that's all the time that we have for Matt. Let's give him a